Well, unfortunately, companies spent a lot of money trying to address the Cineastic part because they said, well, if we spend more money on production values, then our event's going to be really good.
Oy.
But that didn't work because the problem is that no matter how much you spent, it's 1/10 of what Breaking Bad spent on their episodes, and I can just watch that. So I'm not tuning into your enterprise event for your production values. However, solving things like streaming and bandwidth and audio quality and things like that,
Yeah.
that's where I would agree. You got to have that stuff nailed down, high availability, perhaps even backup channels. That kind of
Mhm.
stuff needs to get sorted out.
Mhm.
For goals, I mean, the beauty of the online stuff is you can measure virtual activity. You can set any goals you want. It's up to you to figure out what those metrics are and how best to evaluate them. You could certainly have some lead gen metrics attached to some of this stuff without much of a problem.
Mhm.
But I would be more inclined to not just have a lead gen metric, but some type of a community involvement metric to try to see which members of these events have ongoing participation in your community over time and why or why not, because that's the real goal. I mean,
Mhm.
what we really want is to maintain momentum throughout the year and not. That was always the problem with these classic events is you would have this big
Genau.
blowout and then you pretty much forget about that company for the
Ja.
rest of the year, and that's not how you want it to be with customers or with people like us. They want to figure out how to engage us all the time. So I think it's got to be community metrics, but with online stuff, you can measure all kinds of stuff as far as like you can look at how many hours I spent on your event pretty easily. So that could be one criteria is how much time did I spend. If you can get me to fill out a survey, you can get a lot more data
Mhm.
that way. As you know
Mhm.
already, Thomas, I'm not a big survey fan.
Ja.
But in the case of an event, that's one thing you can try. In one of my most recent virtual events pieces, I write about how, especially in B2B,
Mhm.
um, the companies should not be trying to compete on. It's a battle for attention and all of our
Mhm.
conflicting priorities. Don't compete on entertainment. Compete on relevance. So, relevance is, can you make a difference in my work life, in my professional life, with your content and with what you're offering me at this
Mhm.
event? Can you and ultimately, can you can you make me a more connected individual in my industry? Can you help me to connect to people that I can learn from in the future?
Mhm.
Can you can you get me better connected to product managers inside your organization so that I can get my questions answered in the future? Now, okay, well, what kind of experience was that? Well, it's an experience that unfolds over time because I measure it not just on the caliber of what happened,
Mhm.
but on what I take from it. Let me give you an example. Like I went to a virtual event where there was a pretty good. I think music at virtual events is pretty bad because you listen to the webcam speakers, it sounds crappy. But the guy put on a pretty good little acoustic concert. He wasn't a famous musician. It was about 15 minutes, fine. I enjoyed it. It was a nice experience, but that doesn't attach me any further to that vendor or that vendor's goals or their products. It was nice, but honestly, I forgot which vendor put him on stage. So there's no
Mhm.
connection there long term. Um, whereas if I had made connections with 5 people from that vendor on LinkedIn, then they could be messaging me or I could be messaging them.